Could we have quiet in the room, please? Thank you. We didn't need, whoever's got that cell phone on, would they turn it off, please? So welcome, everybody. The meeting is properly constituted and called to order. I ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Hearing none, thank you. I'd ask then for confirmation of the minutes from the meeting of October 26, 2017. Motion to approve. Mr. Jeffers, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? The fourth item is a pleasure to announce the reappointment of our board member, Ken Jeffers, who has put his name forward for a second term, so thank you. Mr. Jeffers has been on for one term already and has served with distinction on a number of committees, including the Transformational Task Force. So I'm told you don't have to retake the oath. You're still fine, but thank you for signing up and welcome again. Chin, I just asked when you were out of the room if there are any conflicts of interest, the declarations of the conflict of interest. Chin? No? Okay, thank you. We will hold the statistical briefing, which is item number 5. Item number 6 is a hold for deputation. Item number 7 is a hold for deputation. 6.2 is a hold for deputation. Item number 6.3, the City Council Citywide Real Estate Delegated Authorities Framework and Transition Plan. A motion to receive. Councillor Lee, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. 6.4 is motion to receive the quarterly report, occupational health and safety. Motion to receive. Mr. Jeffers and Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 6.5 is a hold for deputation. 6.6, 6.7, 6.8, all the same. Item number 7 is a deputation. Item number 8, the same thing. There's also a motion there. Item number 9, item number 10, and item number 11 is the contract extension, the IT pre-qualified vendor list. Is there a motion to approve that? Councillor Lee, second Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Okay, we'll start off with a, and there is something under business, other business as well, if you would remind me at the end. So we'll start off, Acting Chief, with the statistical briefing.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ian Williams, delivering today the monthly statistical briefing. This, as most of you know, is part of recommendation number 17 from the Transformational Task Force, a part of our ongoing strategy and approach to delivering increased transparency of information from the Toronto Police Service and assisting in understanding of policing operations in Toronto. So for the previous month and year to date, at the end of October, we've seen approximately the same number of both emergency and non-emergency calls for service, as well as time spent on those calls across the organization. So we are looking at a very comparable year-over-year trend from 2015 to 2017. We're also seeing, for tickets and traffic-related enforcement, a decrease in the number of warnings that have been issued, as well as a decrease, albeit small, in the number of tickets that have been issued as well. For arrests, we're seeing a very small decrease year over year. In this case, it's virtually flat compared to the past 2 years. So we're seeing 2014, 2015, and 2016 and 2017 year to date, a very comparable number of arrests. Changing over to persons in distress or emotionally distressed persons, a slide or a subject that relates largely to mental health in Toronto. We've taken your suggestion, Upala, from last month, and we are considering alternate approaches to referring to this content, and we're gladly doing that in conversation with you. I understand you've been working with Chris Body around that, and we'll be taking that and working further to find an appropriate way to refer to this material. The trend of this, so total calls for service that we've dispatched officers to year to date, has been an increase year over year, which is an ongoing trend. So we're seeing a higher volume of these types of calls year over year, as well as month over month throughout the city of Toronto. So as we've discussed in the past, this represents an increasingly higher volume of work for members of the Toronto Police Service in responding to calls of this nature. When we look at where these calls are occurring across the city, we see a clear clustering in the downtown core, so the highest volume exists within the downtown core, and at a rate of approximately 80 calls per day, this is clearly a very high volume activity. So the public calling the Toronto Police Service on a very regular basis throughout the day for those persons in distress. And in addition to the downtown clustering, we also see that there is broadly across the city a spatial pattern that represents how ubiquitous this challenge is for the organization and the city as well. Related to that subject, mental health apprehensions. So we've seen approximately 8,000 so far this year, and again, this is an increase year over year as well as month over month. And we've seen this on an ongoing basis over the past several years, and in that regard, it is also an increasing volume of work. When we look at the spatial pattern, again, across the city, the apprehension is very consistent with where the calls are received, which is a logical connection there. However, at a much smaller rate, so fewer than half of the calls are resulting in apprehensions, and we're seeing also, again, maybe a slightly broader distribution of those apprehensions across the city as well, at a rate of approximately 26 per day. Homicides are down so far this year, and that's a decrease of approximately 9 compared to this time last year, and that's a relatively positive note, and consistent as well with shootings, which have decreased this year compared to last year as well. So we're seeing fewer shootings and fewer homicides relative to that. Looking at the locations of homicides and shooting occurrences across the city, again, a relatively broad distribution of those occurrences, again, across the city. Some areas where there's been clustering in the east side as well as the northwest corner as well. Firearm seizures are down somewhat compared to this time last year as well as the year previous. That was driven by a change actually that occurred last month in years previous, where there would have been a large seizure in the month of September in previous years that drove what appears to be a large decline this year. However, it's something that was driven by what was a September seizure in 2016 and a seizure in 2015 that represented a large volume of firearms. For the firearms that are seized, a consistent trend is that approximately 40% of firearms are handguns. So about 2 in every 5 handguns that are seized, or 2 in every 5 guns that are seized are handguns. So when we consider that those are fairly concealable, convenient weapons to carry, it's an important statistic to note. Stabbing occurrences for both victims and the events themselves are also down, although relatively small proportion compared to this time last year as previous years. So that's both the number of occurrences as well as the number of victims. The relationships between victim attackers in stabbings remain fairly consistent as well, where approximately 40% of those, the victim attackers, are not known to each other, and the remainder is either they're acquaintances or a relative of some sort, and approximately 20%, or 1 in 5, where there's not enough information to make that determination. This is the spatial distribution of stabbings across the city for the month of October. And you see a high clustering in the downtown core. That tends to be where a large volume of our occurrences take place generally. And in this case, stabbings is consistent with that. Traffic and collisions related events. Collisions are up this year compared to last year. So approximately 5% for total collisions. 7% for those involving property damage. Very small change this year compared to last year for collisions where somebody was injured. And similarly, small percent for fail to remain occurrences. Importantly, though, traffic fatalities are down this year compared to last year, so we're seeing a notable decrease. However, one of the trends that we see very consistent with traffic-related fatalities is those involving seniors, where the fatalities for those over 65 are approximately 50%. Sorry, Andy. Approximately 50% of the occurrences involving that demographic, which again is extremely important and very much in line with Vision Zero activities. So we see a lot of the focus around intersections and the awareness piece coming into play with the approaches around that Vision Zero activities. For the month of October, we can see again for traffic collisions involving injuries and fatalities, a distribution across the city. It's not one intersection, there are quite a number across the city. So it's not consistently in any one location, it is broadly distributed across the city as well. For SIU cases, there's an increase this year compared to last year. We're also seeing an increase in internal complaints, however, a decrease in external complaints. So that decrease in external complaints is relatively small compared to this time last year, only about 1%. So we'd actually consider that about where we were this time last year for the externals. Absenteeism is increased this year compared to last year. This is a trend that we've noted for some time, and it's being addressed in a number of manners through programs that we have and strategies that are being addressed through this issue. And that's both on the uniform and civilian side. And also of note, this absenteeism rate for both uniform and civilian members is still well below other public sector averages for large public organizations. In terms of summary statistics, these are the total volume of events that are documented in Toronto involving police interactions with individuals. And that is the briefing for this month. I am working hard to make this briefing brief such that you're able to move through the agenda quickly. And also of note, Marie Molnar requested some of the requests in addition to what's currently available on this to be tracked and presented online. We've done that. We've created a place on the public safety data portal right beside this content that tracks the requests, whether it's already available and what that request was.
Thank you. So could you explain to me how I get there? You just explained it as if I was on the,
Okay.
I'm sitting in front of my computer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'd have to just step up here to do that.
Thank you. And then I have a question perhaps while you're doing that, which won't be for you, but for the chief. May I, Chair? Chief, this is about page 17, the SIU cases and uniform complaints, where we were advised that there was a significant increase in internal complaints. Obviously, that would be something you would know more about. Don't know whether there's anything you can comment on, but it's on page 17 of Mr. Williams' report. And an internal complaint is described as an allegation from internal sources concerning the conduct of a police officer or the policies or the services provided by the Toronto Police Service. Because it was so significant, I went back to see whether it was like from 1 to 2, but in fact it looks like it's more like from 40 to 200. So I ask for any information you may be able to share on that. Thanks.
Actually, I don't have any information to comment on it myself right now, but I think Barb will be able to update you.
Thank you. The increase in internal complaints is as a result of a risk management initiative that we started this summer, looking at the speeds at which our members are traveling. So we are looking at members who are traveling at 150 kilometers or above, and that is the result, that is the spike in it. So it's something that we are addressing proactively in terms of looking at what our numbers are. Are they going up? Are they going down? And what can we do as a management team to address it? So that's where it's at.
Thanks. That's actually very helpful, and there will be instances where you can actually embed that kind of information in this report, and perhaps others where you can't, but that would be an example where that kind of huge shift might be footnoted so that we have even more information when we're looking at the report. Thank you.
So just to quickly demonstrate where you would find this on the public safety data portal. So this, again, located data.torontopolice.on.ca is our public safety data portal, which contains extensive data that's available for download, as well as a series of dashboards and mapping applications to use that data. It also contains a number of areas, one of which is our strategy approach. I'm just gonna, it's a laptop, so it'll take a second to load. At the bottom right-hand corner, we have where all of these statistical briefings are available, literally each monthly item, where we can see we're in month 3, so each of those have been provided, and they are ahead of the Police Services Board meeting. And we also have our statistical data requests, so you can click on this and see a series of requests that have been made, brought here, and for the most part, where the data is available already. So one of our approaches on this is explaining where the data actually exists already. We understand that actually a lot of the requests can come on an ongoing basis, but for the most part, we're not trying to create large new processes internally. So we want to direct people to the more comprehensive sources of this information. Again, to your point, providing context around some of these. These are professional standards reports, reports explicitly designed around conducted energy weapons. So there's a lot of context that's provided in addition to just statistics.
And is it searchable? For example, number 2, number of people stopped in street checks. If I typed in street checks somewhere, would that take, in the data portal, would it take me to this?
For data that is available for download, it is searchable, absolutely. In terms of this content for street check related information, the link that we provided here as part of the response, it would take you to a report that would be searchable, AODA compliant, and really accessible. No problem.
Thanks, Mr. Williams, for especially on your slide number 3 for your commitment to adjusting the language so that we're being more respectful in how we describe these situations. So my question really, I guess, is to the acting chief, just around the increase in calls related to overdoses. I understand that the service is not carrying naloxone at this time. Can you please let us know why that is?
Yes, okay. I've got Superintendent Scott Baptiste here, who's done a study for us, an examination of that, and he can perhaps answer some questions for you.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure whether you're looking for a presentation. This just came up recently today, or whether you'd like me to respond to specific questions that you might have. So,
I think it would be helpful if this table could receive a formal presentation from you about why that's not happening. So I understand many services across the province are using it, and I would really challenge you on why it's not being expanded here.
okay. We looked at this over the course, I guess I'm going to take you back about 3 years ago. There was an issue in the division where I was working, in 13 Division, in the area of Dufferin and St. Clair, where we were having an issue with a specific methadone clinic, and it was turning into complaints from city councillors and BIAs and a number of things in the area. We commenced a street outreach pilot project. The intent of that was to deal with street-level crime and disorder issues and try to proactively engage drug users at street level and things to try to refer them to other services and that sort of thing. Through my involvement in that project, I learned an awful lot about what was going on in terms of the existence of synthetic opioids, the existence of naloxone. We worked very closely with the Works through Toronto Public Health and the John Howard Society. We partnered with them and had street outreach workers working with police officers in one district for a period of 1 year. To make a long story short, as I went into this, I became very much a proponent of it. I believed that that was something that we should do. And with the ongoing elevation in opioid issues in Toronto and across Canada and literally across North America, as I started learning more about that and started diving into it, I actually changed my opinion on it. And myself, Ron Tavener, who's the chair, he's the superintendent 23 division, who chairs the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Substance Abuse Committee, and Superintendent Gordon Snedden, who is the superintendent running our organized crime enforcement section. The three of us brought our combined resources together, and people who were working at street level and working with these issues. We talked with partners and we looked into this issue, whether this is something that every Toronto police officer should be carrying. We learned a lot, and some of the things we learned is this is very much a jurisdiction-specific issue. So as this issue started coming up, police officers and many first responders became very scared because all of the media reports and things about this is that even a subcutaneous or like an accidental exposure, that there was this idea that someone would fall over dead. And we learned that's not the case. That's not the case. There's time and there's ingestion, and there were many examples going across North America about how police officers specifically were being exposed to these things and what happened if they were exposed. So if you consider a jurisdiction, like I'll use Barrie for example, the Barrie Police Service made a decision for their officers to carry this. They do not have the same prevalence of paramedic services. In Toronto, our paramedics arrive on scene at opioid calls or overdose calls. I don't have the stat right here, but it's approximately 80% of the time before fire or police. In Barrie, that's not the case. So when a 911 call comes in for someone who's experiencing an opioid overdose, we respond all three levels: 911 call, police, fire, ambulance, attending. You have to look at the jurisdiction. Who's going to arrive first at these calls? Do their paramedics carry naloxone? Naloxone's the drug that we're talking about. Do they carry naloxone? Well, in Toronto, we went from just level 1 paramedics to all 3 levels of paramedics carrying naloxone. We also learned that our paramedics, their preferred treatment protocol is to not administer the drug. Their preferred treatment protocol is to ventilate, to stimulate, to monitor, and get transport to hospital. The administering of naloxone is actually a last course of action, because what they found was after administering naloxone, quite regularly there was an immediate stop of the deep coma high that can result in the death, and the person comes out of that high and they're physically violent, and yet the drug, the synthetic opioid, is still in their system and has to run its course. So they ventilate, ensure that the breathing is sound, and get that person to a hospital where they can be closely monitored while that drug works its way through the system. Okay? So there are many reasons why we don't do it. The temperature extremes. The Narcan nasal spray that has been approved by ordering council, that's what a kit looks like. Get 2 doses, 2 little inhalers like so, as opposed to the syringe, intramuscular. It's a whole prep time to inject this, etc. This is what's happening in the United States. A lot of police officers are starting to carry these. A lot of it is because they're concerned about their own safety. We've taken steps to ensure that our drug squad officers, major crime officers, anyone that would be doing a drug warrant, our tactical officers, when they're coming into a potential exposure situation, that they make advance arrangements with our paramedics so that our paramedics are with them and that they have that drug with them when they go in. We now have our firefighters all carrying this in Toronto. That's been approved, so all firefighters are carrying it. Recent data that we received effective this morning at 10 o'clock, we arrive first 1.6% of the time. Out of about, in August and September, there were 600 calls, just over 600 calls. So you start looking at it and think, if we were going to do this, does it make sense that we would all carry it? Our police officers direct traffic in 37-degree, 35-degree humid days wearing dark uniforms. You put this on a dark uniform and that, it's outside of the temperature extreme that this drug has to be maintained at. The recommended temperature is 15 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius for optimal effectiveness. It can handle very short exposure outside of that range, and I might know a bit about it as a police officer. I am no expert on drugs, but what they say is short exposure out of that is fine. Anything in direct sunlight or freezing temperatures, and this degrades quickly. And then there's no way to know whether it's degraded or not. So we would have to figure out a way to do this. Another reason we recommended not to carry it is the Provincial Special Investigations Unit gave us a written position that they would invoke their mandate on every single incident where a Toronto police officer did this that resulted in hospitalization, like being admitted to hospital, or serious injury or death. And at every single SIU investigation, as much as the officer would be trying to save someone's life, that does not negate the fact that there is going to be a lengthy process, a lengthy, stressful process that's hard on our officers to have to go through to justify that they did it. And it doesn't save the fact that it could also potentially result in civil litigation against the Toronto Police Service. So as we really got a sense of this, I thought, we don't need this. There is now so much, it is available free to every user, every family member of a user, every friend of a user. If you walk into a drugstore and ask for it, you can get it. They'll give you a little bit of training, they'll give it to you. The training piece for our officers, if we were going to do it, 1 hour online, 2 hour practical training to cover the liabilities associated with it and to ensure they know how to use it appropriately. So if we were going to do it, there might be some potential for something like a tactical or a structured deployment of this around maybe our supervised injection site locations in divisions like 51 Division 52 and 14, maybe the foot patrol officers in that area, for maybe our frontline sergeants to have this. We're undertaking a review of that right now. The deputy directed me to do that a couple of weeks ago. We've got a meeting set up for Monday morning where we're bringing a bunch of internal stakeholders together to go, okay, if we were going to do this, how would we do it? Who needs it? How could we do that? So it's really jurisdiction specific. And when you look at Toronto, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense for Toronto Police to have it. But if we did, I think it would have to be very much thought out and a structured or limited deployment versus just everyone having this.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments, and I think there are a lot of issues to consider when expanding the use of naloxone. I think it'd be very interesting to hear what healthcare providers have to say, because as a healthcare professional myself, and working at the Canadian Mental Health Association, our position is that everyone should have it. So, because ODs aren't just happening around safe injection sites, they're happening in malls, they're happening in restaurants, and they're happening in a lot of bathrooms, right? And there will be instances where police officers are there first before EMS or fire or anybody else, like if it happened in this room, for example, right? So I think I would really appreciate if we could have a robust discussion about this at this table and a public discussion about this, and really hear from you all the aspects that you've just shared, and also have a conversation, a real conversation about the liability, because it's a Schedule II drug. So I'm really surprised. It's the first time I've heard that the SIU has ordered you essentially that every time you use it, that there will be an investigation. I think that's something that we need to consider as well. But it should be part of a first aid protocol, right? What it does, it buys you time until EMS gets there. So I think if there isn't a possibility, and a slight possibility that we could be saving a life, we need to be doing that, because that's really, that's what we're all here to do.
It is interesting to note as well that since fire has, the fire department has had it, they have not once administered it. They're following their treatment protocol as well, which mirrors the paramedics' treatment protocol, and that being a last-ditch effort. And the data that we had, which was current to about 6 months ago, the ambulance, the paramedics in Toronto administered it between 10 and 15 times a month after going through all these other things that they arrived to that decision that that was the appropriate way to handle it.
Do you want to make a recommendation that they come, Scott and that the acting chief come back with a more fulsome evaluation so that we could have a discussion? Mayor Terry, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, if that's where we're headed, Mr. Chair, I would only like to make sure that we have in there, as usual, comparable information on other large police forces.
Yes.
In Barrie, I get the distinction, but Ottawa, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, I'm not aware. I've sort of heard anecdotes here and there, but if you could come back with that as part of the information on what others are doing. The fact to me, I'll just say to you as a comment, Mr. Chair, in anticipation that we're going to send it off for further review, the fact that it's not administered to me is not a relevant fact. You have fire insurance and you hope you'll never have a fire at your house. So that isn't what it's about, but it is about what saves lives, and so I would think that kind of presentation would be very helpful.
So, Ms. Shandaker, do you want to make that motion? And
Sure, yes, I'll move. If it's possible to have that in December, that would be great.
Actually, we've got some other meetings. I'd prefer to give us 2 months, so do it in
2
January.
months? Ms. Shandaker is not going to be with us in January, but how about February?
Oh. Okay.
Is February okay, or can you do December?
No, I would prefer, no, not December. We need some more time to do what we want to do, so.
So is
So
there
it's
any
either-
other discussions or questions of Scott? So first of all, Scott, thank you very much for the update. Murray?
Just an observation, and I think you were about to go there. That was a remarkably refreshing way to answer questions off the cuff. Really appreciated the acting chief, that you had someone in the room, that you were able to come and share your information so candidly with us. That was really, really helpful, much better than the usual standard PowerPoint presentation. So thank you very much.
Ken, did you have something?
Yeah, this is a general question. General question, maybe the acting chief can...
Sorry, before we go back to the statistical stuff, I just want to finish off on this one question.
Oh, I see, okay.
So if there is a motion, and Ms. Chandrasekhar is putting one forward, is there a seconder for that, or is there any further discussion? Seconded by Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So is that
Thank you,
for January or February?
February. Ken, over to you on anything else.
Yeah, it's a question around, no, we're discussing the motion, you say?
Well, we discussed and passed the motion for the,
Yeah, my question is...
them to come back. Yours is more about a statistical. Yeah, right, so now over to you.
You ready for me?
Yes, sir.
In looking at when you present the statistics, and for example, I saw that crime is down, and violence is sometimes down in certain, overall, in a general way. What happens when you look at the statistics and you see it's up in certain areas consistently, right? Are there any measures that we take to address this? Like, how do we address that when it happens?
So that's an operational discussion at the divisional and detective operations side, which I'll let the chief discuss.
Yeah, our intelligence unit monitors all of that, and so that's precisely how we'll deploy our assets. So if we see something developing in a certain area, based on the analysis, because of what's happening, we will deploy assets there, try to discover what's going on, but also deploy assets there to try to address the situation.
Working with, for example, support groups, whether it be in the public sector or community groups, is there a plan to do that, to prevent the escalation in one particular area on a consistent basis?
Well, I think our crew units have been working to do that, and have continued to do that. And then as we expand and move into our new neighborhood officer program, that'll be a key element as well, that engagement with communities, individuals, school boards, everybody in the neighborhood, to get a better sense of what's going on so that we can address the crime collectively.
So there is a comprehensive plan to do that, is what you're saying?
That's correct, yes.
Any other questions of Ian around the statistical review? Ian, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you.
Need a motion to receive the briefing? Joanne? Okay, yeah, so Ms. Mulliner, seconded by Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay, that takes us to 6.2, which is the City Council motion denouncing acts of hate and intolerance. 6.1 it is, I'm sorry. There is one deposition, that's Brenda Ross. Brenda?
Yes, I'm coming, Mr. Brown. .1.
Yep, so Brenda, you know the rules. You got 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning. Off you go.
Thank you. 6.1 is the annual report about police health and wellness. I'd like to make some observations about this report. If you quickly go through the report, you will see that we're talking about depression, suicide, general wellness, team visits to officers, sudden cardiac death, suicide, depression again, and so on it goes. And I would like to again mention, we do have even a part about mental health, which is very important, but I would like to bring to everyone's attention that I feel this report and the undertakings presented in the report regarding wellness, regarding suicide prevention, all of these things. This is one of the reasons that you all approved of Beyond the Blue. I believe that this is in conflict with Beyond the Blue, and I believe that the presentation as written that we're now reading in front of us, this should be where we go, all together in one direction, and everybody should be on the same page. And I feel that everybody is not on the same page, and that harms the police, and that harms the public. It gives the police a chance not to carry on with what we'd like them to do in this report, but to go off to Beyond the Blue. These are professional doctors that we have here, that we're paying for, that have done presentations for us before, and been very impressive with their dedication to the police service. If the police are mentally healthy, that bodes well for the public. And I feel that we are not putting our weight behind the hopeful successes of this report. We have somehow broken down which direction we're going in, and we're now off in two separate directions. It is a mistake to divide the police from the public. The police are part of the public. They're part of our society. They're not a group of thugs who can go off having fights where they beat each other up and carrying on the way they have been all this time. Many times I've told all of you that our family has been victimized by the police, and yet I hardly ever hear anyone else get up and tell you that. Hey, hello board members, I'd like to talk about this report and how it affects me. This report is good for me and my family, and I believe it's good for the police if we actually do this and follow through. And I can't even imagine why anyone would ignore the doctors that we had doing presentations for us with their impressive effort to change the way things are happening in the police force. I thought we just fell into heaven when those ladies were here telling us what they wanted to do. But now, here we are again getting the same report. We're having this, we're having that program, we even again have substantiation that we still have 24-hour access to help if the police require help or their families. What more could anyone ask for? Who among us can pick up the phone at any hour of the day and call and immediately someone's there to help us? We have to continue with this, and we have to stop breaking away and emotionally being stirred by yelling and what people are saying without facts. Where's the documentation? I try to give you documentation when I talk, and I try to present documentation to the superintendents. When I say something, even though I may not give it to all of you, I have given it to some of the superintendents. Now, last but not least, Chaplaincy Services is a very disturbing comment for me in this report. I have complained about one of the chaplains. I've gotten no feedback. I believe that he's biased, that he always was when he was a policeman before he became a chaplain. And I disapprove of him being a chaplain and influencing others. So I would like the board to ask, who is going to give feedback on the chaplain that I've complained about? Because so far, all I've heard from Mr. Druckmann today, and I did not know this until today when Mr. Druckmann told me, when you do not get a response to a Freedom of Information request, you can go to the Privacy Commissioner and insist that the police respond. So I have 2 incidents in the last few minutes that Mr. Druckmann has addressed, which are very disturbing to me, about no answer from Freedom of Information, and about one of the superintendents not cooperating with Mr. Druckmann by giving Mr. Druckmann a copy of a file that I gave to him. Now, I have concerns about this, and I feel that we don't have transparency that we should have. So could we please delve into that? Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Any questions of Brenda Cullig? If not, Brenda raises the point about the disconnect or a disconnect between Out of the Blue. Do you want to comment on the interaction between the two? Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your deposition.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Barbara.
This report outlines some of the initiatives that we're doing. One of the things with all of our initiatives that we look at is whether we are continually meeting the needs of our members. So the wellness program is coming under me, which I've recently taken office, so it is something that is part of my responsibilities that I will also be looking at. So I appreciate your comments. And I'm also going to be looking at the comments of our members in terms of all of this. I want to actually, in terms of answering some of that, the wellness program, one of the purposes of our wellness program is actually to provide members and expose members to different options, because I think, as I said last month, the road to personal wellness is a very individual thing. So these are all the programs that we have. Are they complete? You know, I think I'm going to let our members answer that question, and it's one of the things that when I look at what I need to do for 2018 is to look at, are these programs addressing all the issues that our members require? You know, are they good programs? Are there any barriers to access? So these are some of the things that I'm going to be looking at. And my personal opinion is the purpose of this is to expose members to different wellness elements that they may or may not adopt themselves. So, and again, the more options that we can provide our members, I think the better for their wellness. I want to also just talk about a couple things that are not in this report, because the report was written before our HR restructure that we put in front of the board last month. one of the initiatives that we'll be doing is we're actually going to be putting all of our wellness resources under one manager. So we have great resources. They're in different parts of the org structure right now. We're going to put them under one manager so that one person can be responsible for their strategic direction, their deployment, their desired outcomes. We're also going to be looking at filling some resources that we currently don't have right now. You talked about the excellent work of our psychologists. I am in complete agreement with you. They do amazing work for our members. We're looking at advocating for more of those resources, as well as a wellness coordinator, so that we have some folks who can administer the programs. Also within that, we are looking at, in our people plan, the vision of a comprehensive and a coordinated wellness strategy. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area, and there's going to be a lot of conversations happening in terms of what is working, what we can do better. You know, it's almost like a traffic light. What do we need to stop, start, and continue doing? So thank you for your comments. I hope that answers your questions.
Councillor Lee?
Well, my knowledge, thank you, Chair. Deputy was talking about chaplaincy. Our chaplains are all volunteers, right? They're not paid.
Correct.
And they don't even get paid for mileage to go to any presentations or any of that nature, right?
I'd have to get back to you, but I believe there's a small budget associated potentially with some of the things.
I was told that they don't even get mileage, any kind of expenses that they got to take out of pocket.
Okay.
That's what I was informed by one of the chaplains anyways. So this is all voluntary, and so for somebody says that please report back to me or something. So this is voluntary. So that request should be coming to the service, not to the chaplain, right?
Correct. We do have someone who looks after that,
Right.
coordinates that program.
Yeah, coordinate the program and provide the proper answers.
Right.
Not the chaplain. Thank
Correct.
you.
Any other questions, colleagues?
Could you please answer who's responsible for the fact that I've complained about a chaplain?
How about I take
Thank you, Brenda. We'll talk afterwards. Deputy McLean, thank you very much. If there's no further questions on this, and this is the health workplace health initiatives, may I have a motion to receive? Ms. Mulliner, seconded. Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. And now we'll get to the one I was mistakenly mentioning, and that is the 6.2, which is the City Council, the member motion denouncing acts of hate and intolerance in Toronto. There are three deputants. The first is Brian DeMattis. Brian, you got 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
Thank you. Greetings, Toronto Police Service Board. Thank you for the opportunity
You better push your mic to make sure it's on there.
Do what?
Is that mic not on?
Hello? Testing?
Yes,
Oh,
that's
sorry.
better. Speak closer to it.
Sorry about that. Greetings, Toronto Police Service Board members. Thank you for the opportunity to debut today. I'm here to speak on the agenda item denouncing acts of hate and intolerance in Toronto. I was very cautious at first, as a similar motion was on the agenda of City Council that was disguised as acts of hate, but was in fact an Islamophobic motion to silence Toronto's Muslim population. I'm glad to read this motion does not have the same Islamophobic statements involved. It is difficult for the TPS to follow a directive that might contradict federal and provincial laws, but there are steps that TPS can follow on standard operating procedures that align with the oath officers take to uphold the law. There was a rally happening at Nathan Phillips Square. It was called an anti-Justin Trudeau rally, but in fact, it was a white supremacist, homo, and transphobic rally. I attended a rally there that was in full opposition of this racist, xenophobic, and homo and transphobic rally. During this horrific event, I was disappointed in the actions of police. As a member of the LGBTQ community, I was harassed and called names such as faggot, sissy, and other derogatory terms in front of police. This was in addition to the white supremacist rally goers having signs stating white is right and completely disgusting terms against Muslim, LGBT folks, and anti-black racist signs. Sadly, the police were protecting them as they harassed us and promoted clearly hateful messages that incited violence towards people who identify a marginalized group that is protected by federal and provincial laws. Sadly, the police did not do their job that day, and I'm hoping policies and procedures can change that this motion can reaffirm support so such activities and actions are not repeated in City Hall, and members of marginalized communities feel supported by police when acts of hate are directed to us. Adopting this motion can reaffirm support, but it must go beyond this. This motion would be useless if it does not guide the TPS in rewriting policies, training, and best practices to community approach policing. It is pointless to have access without fear when police are not following that directive. Unlawfully carding of racialized members contributes to systematic anti-black racism, and carding and asking citizenship documentation to folks who are known to happen in public areas like Dufferin Mall. When my people were being carded, members of my family were being carded at Dufferin Mall. I'm hoping with this motion it enables the groundwork to not only for policy change, but fundamental changes and additions to police training and yearly professional development courses for police regarding this matter, which will contribute to best practices in police organizational development and capacity. I'm hoping this board takes these recommendations seriously and adopts them, but again, we must go further. And this speaks really to the community-based policing and such policies. Police, city staff, and council should be working with a grassroots community consultation on how to best serve communities that are marginalized and are targeted by hate crimes. We need to build a model of policing that follows an anti-oppressive and anti-racist approach. The TPS also need a new system that works on community level of reporting hate crimes. It is not enough to take a report, but we should also be focusing on how TPS handle victims of hate crimes. There should be a referral procedure.
1 minute.
There should be a referral procedure and/or working with social services and enable to help victims of this specific crime by having crisis phone lines or a hired social worker or counselor on 24-hour standby that the police can utilize, call upon, or direct victims to. So truly, victim impact statements can be made and helping those who have faced hate crime trauma. We're not only building the city we can all freely be part of, but we as Toronto are a global leader on policies and practices of inclusion this must, if we become a just city, we must follow practices of inclusion and equity. I want to end this deputation by pointing out a relevant case that has recently happened. Police were notified of a deceased trans person in Rosedale area in early August and did not alert the community. And we understand that they were trying to find the family first, but we also need to recognize they could have alerted us without revolving any information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have you got a written presentation? If you can send it to us?
Okay.
Oh, great. Any questions, colleagues? Ken?
You mentioned training. Excuse me. The police, services, receives a lot of training around human rights and how to interact and work with marginalized groups, etc. What do you think may be missing from your observation in the interaction?
Well, I read the policy and procedures that police follow, and it's inadequate. It's yes, they have basic training, but as we evolve as people, so does our understanding of communities. For instance, I want to be specific on trans folks, on the training with that. The procedure for police arresting a trans person is, it's up to them to decide what jails they go to. It's up to them to decide what gender they get follow-up, and not every police officer is very aware of gender identity and extortion, and that is within police procedure. So I think we need to expand, and how we work with going is grassroots community. Like, part of their training should be going to communities and grassroots workshops that are being taught by the very individuals and very communities that it's impacted. I think just reading from a book and signing is insufficient, and it should be a yearly course that it takes. Like, city staff take a human rights course like yearly. and I'm not sure if police do follow that, but it should be hired by trained professionals. Like if you're going to do a trans workshop, you should connect with the 519 Community Center to do that trans workshop and hired professionals. Right now, this is very basic and insufficient training that the police get. And this regards to mental health, to many other aspects as well.
Just a follow-up question. Have you been in touch with the Human Rights Commission in terms of supporting some of what you've expressed and how they can do that?
The Ontario Human Rights Commission?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been changing a little. I work with C.I.R.T.
I'm sorry, what?
They've changed in the past few years. They don't take individual cases no more, to my understanding. And but I haven't been working exactly with them.
No, because the part of the role of the Human Rights Commission, I don't know if you've seen their five-year development plan on the website, but it is to address specifically what you're dealing with, and just suggesting too that you may want to take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm with C.I.R.T. Ontario, and we were asked to consult with that 5-year training. So I think I skimmed through it, but I can't remember the details. So I will relook at that.
Marie, you had a question?
My question is probably a request for your ongoing assistance and the folks who know more about issues than the service does, because we're just not as representative yet as we'd want to be. So I'm looking at the report that this motion proposes to request of the service, and it says very specifically, the board received the motion and requests that the chief report to the board on the extent to which the service governance is consistent with, it says city councils, but we'll say with human rights.
Mm-hmm.
You addressed some of this in your presentation to us. You addressed some of in the answer to Mr. Jeffers. So what would be helpful is if you could outline what you think are the areas that the service should be benchmarking itself against. You don't necessarily need to do that now for us, although I'm happy to hear what some of those areas might be to help us understand when the report comes back what it is that we should be hoping will be in it that would help address some of the observations that you have made. Thank
I
you.
would love the opportunity to do that. Thank you. Sure.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Derek Moran next. Eric, I have a new, more accurate timepiece here, but you still have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute
You
warning.
actually shorted me 34 seconds last time.
No, I didn't. I
Yes,
didn't.
you
I
did.
didn't.
I'll show you the tape.
Okay.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. So I'm going to be reading excerpts from an article called Hate Speech, written by just some guy on Twitter, which explains why hate speech is actually a made-up crime by the government. Is this what my grandfather went to war for? Remember I said this, Canada. You are giving up what's most important, and you're giving it up without a fight. Why? Hate speech is one of the invented crimes of the 1970s. It is one of the many legal mechanisms used to suspend your critical thought. Legally, hate speech is defined, but hate itself is not legally defined. There's a reason for this. If hate were legally defined, even the most dull-witted reader would realize that any legislation that bore this definition would literally be criminalizing an emotion. It sounds ridiculous when you read it, but I have to ask, if you think it's reasonable to criminalize one emotion, where do you draw the line? Are you going to regulate love as well? How about jealousy, envy, greed, lust? I've got lots of those. Criminalizing an emotion legally negates any agency you may have. It doesn't matter if it's a corporation or the state. Censoring thought or speech is never, ever the answer. It's about to become the norm. Here's the other problem with hate crime. If you criminalize speech, those with the motivation to speak these criminal words do so behind closed doors. And whenever I bring a Hitler reference into one of my articles, it's actually relevant because the world's first hate speech laws appeared in Germany in the 1920s. Hate speech laws are right out of the Communist Manifesto. Regulating what people say, criminalizing what people feel, sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? Today's legal word is offense. Offense, a crime, an act which contravenes the criminal law of the state in which it occurs. In R versus M, Judge Carswick of the Ontario Provincial Court adopted these words to define offense. The word offense has evolved to define a concept which involves the prohibition of some definable conduct by the state and the imposition of some definable punishment for failure to comply with the duty imposed. An act contrary to, offending against, and punishable by law, but particularly one made to by statute rather than by common law, the latter being usually called crimes, and also particularly one punishable on summary conviction. In case you were wondering, this is why being offended makes you a special cupcake snowflake in need of protection. As you can see from the above quotation, case law and offense is essentially a codified process for specific conduct. Its initial intent was for actual crimes where there was an injured party. In legal process, if someone states they are offended, they are claiming a crime has occurred. This made the original intent of codified offenses vulnerable to ever-broadening definitions of what constituted offense, and therefore a crime. Keep in mind that these laws are created by government workers. These are the people who are deciding that what you say, think, and feel are crimes, while actual crimes are excused with insulting concepts like cultural relativism. Google that. Once you've absorbed what an absurd idea that is, know that it is policy throughout the European Union. I tell you this now so it isn't used against you later, because hate speech and hate crimes are lies sold as fact. It's no different than a church selling faith and belief as being equal to trust and understanding. They reward you for accepting these lies and make it easier. Truth and understanding are a lot harder to attain than faith and belief. One requires work, the other doesn't. Your owners know this and will leverage it at every opportunity. These things that I point to have already happened, and there's nothing you can do about it. Through your own self-imposed ignorance and apathy, your rights are slowly being taken away. Every lawyer you speak to considers this concept legally sound because that's the big lie of the Law Society. They've convinced the world that legal and right are synonymous. This is programmed into you from childhood, although it's a lie fewer people are believing anymore. When one of these programs exists, somebody, usually a church or a law society, benefits directly and or indirectly. It costs them a crap load of money to do it. No matter how expansive or intrusive and or government get, the threats to their existence can never be purged.
1 minute.
Ask anyone from the former Soviet Union. Censoring speech is not and never has been an answer. In fact, we used to make fun of other countries for having such a ridiculous idea. This is the inevitable result when you criminalize an emotion. Hate, like respect, is often earned. But with our PC culture, protecting our precious snowflakes from the perils of hate speech, respect is now supposed to be presumed and not earned. The term disrespect has the same imaginary crime status as hate speech, and this is simply for the crime of refusing to grant respect that wasn't earned.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of the deputant? Okay, thank you.
Can you pass a motion to criminalize love?
You did get about 14 seconds back. Dion Renee, I do not see here. It doesn't work, I'm sorry.
She's right here.
You can't do it.
Even Fred Costin from the
Carl?
PD of the Ontario Association of Police Services Board, he said at a forum on police.
I'm sorry, we have nothing to deal with that. We can't handle that.
Well, she's right
So
here.
thank you.
Dion?
I'm sorry.
She's right here. She can just go right ahead. She's right here.
I'm here, and according to the Human Rights Code and the
Oh, you don't-
AOPA and the Charter, I have a right to speak, and the board has an obligation.
Okay, I'm sorry. We just do not have the technology for us to hear properly at
Well,
the
because
present
the
time.
mic is off.
I thank you very much, but the answer is no. So, thank you.
So you turn up.
We can't accommodate that.
She's right here.
Under the Human Rights Code and the Accessibility for
We have a written submission from Dion, and that will do, so thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, we can't deal with it on the phone.
You're not even turning on the mic.
Okay, thank you, but if you step away from the microphone.
It's right here. Okay.
No.
Go ahead.
Listen, we're not,
Under the Human Rights Code, under the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and
Colleagues.
under the Charter, the board cannot discriminate from my participation in the person with disability, trying to make a deputy. The board has
I'm
to
sorry, we'll have to
accommodate
ask you to
me,
step.
and this
Ken,
is
would
the
you
way.
mute that microphone, please?
We tried.
The board has to accommodate, Chairperson. You can't exclude me from
He's
participating.
ignoring you.
Thank you very much.
He's doing his usual thing, just ignoring you.
So colleagues, we have Ms. Renee's written deposition here attached to your yellow package. So, if there are, is there any further discussion on this item, which is the item number 6.2?
Is there any discussion, colleagues? If not, a motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded Ms. Mullins.
I have a proposed amendment to the motion in terms of the process. This refers to my question to the prior deputy, Mr. DeMatos. I'm wondering whether the service would be amenable, and then I'll frame it in a motion to work with the community. And for example, Mr. DeMatos has said that he would be willing to assist in identifying the very specific areas of service governance that community members advise require a human rights assessment. And if the answer is yes, then I'd frame it as a motion. If not, then we'll take it offline.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, we are already working with many communities as we develop our training in that, so I think that's
So when the
consistent with
report
what
comes
we've been
back to
doing.
the board, I would expect to see that described as part of the process, and that the community. Yes, so that's. So can I amend the motion so that can we put it up on the board, Carlene? Oh. Okay, thank you. So let me see. So so could I request that the report to the board include a description of the work by the Toronto Police Services with the community to identify specific areas of service governance where the community has indicated that there should be a human rights assessment. I use the word assessment loosely. Assessment may not be the right word, but the idea is to have the community identify those areas together with the police service where there needs to be a human rights lens or a human rights assessment. I wasn't clear from the Chair, from the recommendation, what exactly we were asking the service to bring back to us, so I'm trying to spell out that whatever the service brings back to us ought to have that the with community members, thank you, so work with community members to include, to identify the specific areas of service governance that community members advise require a human rights assessment. So that's my specific text, to identify the specific areas of service governance that community members advise require a human rights assessment. Service governance that community members advise require a, I think you've got the rest. And at the very beginning, to include a description of the work by the Toronto Police Services, of the work by the Toronto Police Service with the community. You can delete of the work by the Toronto Police Service. Yeah, maybe you got it twice there. Describe the work by the Toronto Police Service. I'm capturing the work with the community. I'm so sorry to take up the time over the words, but with the community. Yeah. And so for folks in the room, they will know that specifically that was in response to Mr. DeMatos' indication that he would be prepared to contribute. Yes, and it should be advise, not advice. Thank you.
Colleagues, discussion? If not, this moment there's a motion before us. Is there a seconder? All in favor? Any contrary? Carried.
Thank you.
So that is, takes us to,
What's the time frame on that, Chair?
the time frame?
Okay.
That takes us to 6.5, is that correct? And there's a deputation by Chris Langenfeld, who is also not here. And that was the only deputation.
Sorry, I haven't given authorization to speak on behalf of Mr. It's called the delegation of authority.
Carl?
No,
I'm sorry, I'm advised that that's not acceptable.
But he's outside. He's giving me the advice. It's written. It's a document, legal document.
It's written, written deputation, and if you wanted to make a deputation on your own right, you have to put your name on this.
There is a written deputation from Chris, and you cannot have his authorization. You have to apply to do it yourself. Is the advice I get.
But I'm here to speak for you.
I'm sorry, it doesn't look that way, and we've already got the information you want to put forward because you were kind enough to put it in writing. So thank you. So
He was right, eh?
I've just taken legal advice.
He's not something.
Colleagues, the 6.5 is the 2017 operating budget variance for Toronto Police, period ending September 30th, 2017. Is there any discussion on that? Any discussion on Mr. Langenfeld's comments? If not, may I have a motion to approve? Councillor Lee, seconded. Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. So item number 6.6 is the next one, and that is also Mr. Langenfeld, and so the capital budget variance.
Again, please, let's give me a delegation of authority to speak for him.
Carl?
Same position.
It's on the record, right? Okay.
Yes, it is. So that is, if there are no further depositions, there are not. Is there a?
This is not, this is.
On 6.6 on the capital budget, there was an item on EBI, Enterprise Business Intelligence. Basically, we worked out the mitigation with IBM. And is there a change of scope? Is there going to be any extra cost?
That's exactly what we're dealing right now, is in terms of trying to, and that's why we put it in the report, to see exactly what the implications are going to be with respect to some of the issues that we're currently experiencing.
Yes, I've seen it right now.
And
Okay.
certainly the board will be kept apprised of
Thank
any
you.
changes.
Questions or move?
Councillor Lee moved approval, seconded. Seconded and Muller. All in favor? Contrary? So that was 6.7 also has a deposition, and there were two of them. The first one is Derek Moran.
Go, Taylor.
5 minutes, Derek.
So, parking enforcement officers enforce City of Toronto bylaws. Bylaws are rules of a corporation or organization for its own internal governance. I actually want to say something nice about Mayor Tory right now. Is that permitted by the board? He did a great public service recently for the people of Toronto at City Council. Of course, I made a meme out of it. This is Meritori right here. It's kind of dark. It was an item regarding natives somehow, as I recall. Meritori says, there is one recommendation that does have a very direct role for the City of Toronto. Not the city as in the corporation, but for something to happen in the capital city of the province of Ontario. So he's nicely made the distinction there between the City of Toronto, which is the corporation, and Toronto, which is just the geographical area that we all live in. Just wanted to point that out. So this is from an article by David Ryder of the Toronto Star. He's speaking about Brian Monis, the guy who's in charge of all those parking enforcement officers. He says, Brian says, I honestly don't understand it. I just don't know why that is. And then I guess next month, his office will start training for all parking officers on how to deal with irate drivers. So in this item, it says PEU generally schedules 1 recruit class per year and hires the appropriate number of officers to ensure that on average, it is at its full complement of officers during the year. Well, you know what? I have got the best idea on what Brian Monis should add to this new training course for PEOs so the public will have confidence in them that they're actually competent to do their jobs. Anyone ever heard of the void for vagueness doctrine? This is from Committee for the Commonwealth of Canada versus Canada 1991, where the Supreme Court of Canada said, there appear to be 2 specific concerns underlying the vagueness concept. The citizen should be given proper notice of the law, and no room for arbitrary government action should exist under that law. While these principles find their application mainly in penal matters, it offends neither common sense nor logic that a law which infringes a fundamental right or freedom guaranteed by the Charter must also be clear, understandable, and not subject to arbitrary application. The United States Supreme Court expressed the doctrine in these terms. It is a basic principle of due process that an enactment is void for vagueness if its prohibitions are not clearly defined. Vague laws offend several important values. First, because we assume that man is free to steer between lawful and unlawful conduct, we insist that laws give the person of ordinary intelligence a reasonable opportunity to know what is prohibited so that he may act accordingly. Second, if arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement is to be prevented, laws must provide explicit standards for those who apply them. A vague law impermissibly delegates basic policy matters to policemen, judges, and juries for resolution on an ad hoc and subjective basis with the attendant dangers of arbitrary and discriminatory application. Third, but related, where a vague statute abuts upon sensitive areas of basic First Amendment freedoms, it operates to inhibit the exercise of those freedoms. Uncertain meanings inevitably lead citizens to steer far wider of the unlawful zone than if the boundaries of the forbidden areas were clearly marked. Rights and freedoms must be nurtured, not inhibited. Vague laws intruding on fundamental freedoms create paths of uncertainty onto which citizens fear to tread, fearing legal sanction. Vagueness serves only to cause confusion, and most people will shy from exercising their freedoms rather than facing potential punishment. An excellent example of that is being able to ask questions here. Nowhere does it say that we can't ask questions, but this board, along with City Hall, try to maintain this illusion that we can't, even though it's not clear, it's vague, and it's arbitrary. It doesn't actually say that anywhere. So that offends the void for vagueness doctrine. This is from Green versus Law Society of Manitoba, 2017, where the Supreme Court of Canada said rules made by law societies are akin to bylaws passed by municipal councils. Because I'm just thinking maybe if the Toronto Parking Enforcement Officer was trained properly to begin with on just what exactly a bylaw is, let alone who a City of Toronto bylaw actually applies to, then maybe they would be able to avoid all of this hostile behavior from the public if they just did their jobs and properly executed the law. Do I have any seconds left?
4.
This is a definition from Bouvet's Laws Dictionary, 1856, bylaws, rules, and ordinances made by a corporation for its own government.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Derek? Thank you, Derek. The other deputy is Chris Langenfeld, who, as we know, is not here. Is there any discussion, colleagues, on the operating budget variance report for the parking enforcement unit? If not, may I have a motion to receive? Councillor Lee, Upla, seconds, all in favor? Any contrary? That's carried. Item number 6.8, again, there's a deposition, and again, it's Chris Langenfeld. It's the semi-annual report publication of expenses. Is there any discussion on that, colleagues? If not, may I have a motion to Councillor Lee? Seconded? Ms. Mulliner? All in favor? Any contrary? Item number 7 is the meeting schedule, and again, there were 2 depositions, one by Chris Langenfeld and one by Dion Renee. I would say that the meeting schedule is the schedule of dates. It is something, colleagues, that we have discussed. We will want to, next year, look at taking meetings out into the community so that a variety of areas are planned, but that will be discussed early in the new year. Is there any discussion on that? If not, may we have a motion to approve it? Councillor Lee, seconded Ms. Chandrasekhara. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay. Item number 8, Mr. Langenfeld had made a this is the corporate donation to the Toronto Police Services dog units. Mr. Langenfeld wanted to make a deposition on it. He had made a written one, which I can answer, and that is, his question was, would the board know the anonymous donor is? And the answer is yes, we do. So with that, are there any other questions on this item? And the motion is, okay, that the board approve the corporate donation of the Toronto Police Service, Police Dog Service Unit. May we have is there a proposer for that motion? Councillor Lee, seconded. Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Okay, that's carried. Item number 9, again, Chris Langenfeld wanted to make the deposition on the dry cleaning, pressing, and laundering services contract. Is there any discussion on that? Then if not, may I have a motion to approve? Councillor Lee, seconded. Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Item number 10, again, Mr. Langenfeld wanted to make a deposition. This is the award of the Microsoft Licensing Solutions vendor for Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. Is there any discussion on that, colleagues? And if not, a motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded. Mr. Jeffers, all in favor? Any contrary? Okay, I think that works it through except for the one item of other business. Is that, and Acting Chief, you had something you wanted to bring up. Jim? You had something you wanted to bring up under other business?
Yeah, the support our troops decals, but I understand you want to see a letter in writing to the board.
Right, it's just,
The decal that you had talked about is on other service vehicles. You had shown us a picture of that. I think we just want the request in writing, but you would like it the approval here for
Yes.
that. So, questions, colleagues?
Perhaps the Acting Chief could describe what he's requesting so that everyone's clear. Thank you.
Oh, it's just a support our troops logo that goes on the back of on the police car. It's a yellow.
And this
sticker,
is
if
the
you
same
will.
that's on the fire trucks
we
and the
see it on
emergency
fire
vehicles.
ambulance, other city vehicles as well.
Colleagues, any other questions of the chief? If not, a motion to approve that. Mayor Tory, seconded Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Is there any other business?
Chair, did you do this contract extension IT professional service? I heard it was
Yes.
Microsoft.
We did that. There was no deposition
All right.
on that, so we did
No,
at
it's
the very
fine. All in
beginning.
the, okay,
Why
fine.
did
Thank
you Want to reopen it? Okay, okay, yeah. Any other business? If not, motion to adjourn. Councillor Lee, Ms. Chandrasekhara, all in favor? Yeah, thanks. Thank you.